The diner was small and quiet in the early morning, with sunlight slipping through the blinds and painting golden lines across the worn wooden floor. The smell of coffee and frying bacon filled the air, mixing with the faint scent of cleaning supplies. It was the kind of place where the regulars knew each other's orders by heart, and where the waitress moved with practiced ease from table to table. She was young, with tired eyes that carried a quiet strength, and hands that had grown skilled not just at serving food, but at keeping the fragile peace between customers. Her name was never on the marquee, and most people didn't know much about her. To them, she was just the polite young woman who brought pancakes and coffee with a gentle smile. She moved through the diner with quiet grace, balancing trays loaded with plates and cups. Every step was careful, measured, almost like a dance she had perfected over years of long shifts. She smiled at the regulars, nodded to the cooks, and made sure everyone felt attended to, even when her feet ached and her back throbbed. Behind that smile, though, was a tiredness that ran deeper than just the long hours. She worked to keep herself afloat, to pay bills and manage life on her own. And music was the only thing that made the burden lighter, the only thing that made her heart feel free. In the corner of the diner there was a piano. It was an old upright with chipped wood and keys that sometimes stuck if pressed too quickly. Most people ignored it. It was more decoration than anything else, a relic from when the diner had been a small community hub decades ago. But she knew its worth. She had grown up with music, learning piano from an early age, her fingers moving across the keys as easily as they now moved across trays and plates. Music had been her companion, her escape, her voice when words were not enough. She never played for anyone at the diner. No one had ever asked, and she liked it that way. The piano was her secret. Some mornings, when the diner was quiet and the early risers were the only customers, she would steal a few minutes to sit at the piano. Her fingers would hover over the keys for a moment, almost reverently, before she let them fall and coax a soft melody into the air. Sometimes she played classical pieces, sometimes simple tunes that floated like whispers, gentle enough that the people eating breakfast barely noticed. It wasn't about showing off. It was about letting herself breathe, letting the music remind her of the world beyond the cramped kitchen and the clatter of plates. That morning was no different. She had finished serving a group of regulars and returned to the piano for a few moments of peace. She pressed the keys lightly, letting a delicate melody fill the corner of the diner. Her eyes closed, her shoulders relaxed, and for a few minutes the stress of unpaid bills, long shifts, and sleepless nights melted away. The music flowed from her as naturally as her breath, carrying warmth and a sense of calm through the room. The bell above the door jingled, snapping her out of her reverie. A group of new customers had arrived, loud and boisterous, filling the diner with a raucous energy that was completely different from the usual quiet mornings. They were young adults, dressed in flashy clothes, laughing in a way that made the other diners shift uncomfortably in their seats. They didn't look like people who would sit quietly and enjoy a simple breakfast. They looked like people who were there to be seen, to make noise, to disrupt the ordinary flow of the day. She approached them with her usual calm smile, taking their orders and managing their table with the same efficiency she used for everyone else. But she could feel their eyes on her in a different way. They whispered and snickered, clearly amused by her quiet demeanor and modest appearance. One of them made a comment loud enough for her to hear, a remark about how boring the diner looked and how amusing it was that someone like her worked there. She kept her smile in place, her voice steady as she confirmed their orders, but inside, a familiar knot of discomfort tightened. She had learned to ignore such things over the years, to focus on the work and not on the judgment of strangers. As she carried plates back and forth, she caught herself tapping her fingers lightly on the table, almost unconsciously. The rhythm was soft, almost invisible, but it reminded her of the music waiting in the corner. She longed for the quiet moment she had been enjoying, but the laughter and chatter made it impossible. Still, she kept her head down and moved through the day, serving with precision, managing the kitchen staff, and keeping the diner running smoothly. During a lull, when she returned to refill drinks, she noticed a young man from the group lingering near the piano. He was looking at it curiously, then glanced at her with a smirk, clearly expecting her to do something, though what he expected she couldn't tell. She ignored it, busy with her work, though a small part of her wished for a moment of courage to just sit and play. Not for them, not for anyone else, but for herself, for the music that had been a faithful companion through so many hard times. She moved back to the counter to collect dishes, but the group's chatter had grown louder, their amusement turning to mockery. One of them joked about someone playing piano in a diner, and the others laughed, clearly thinking it would be funny to see if she could actually play. Her heart sank, a mixture of irritation and a strange spark of defiance stirring inside her. The thought of sitting at that old piano and proving nothing to anyone, just letting her fingers speak, teased her in a way she couldn't ignore. For the rest of the morning, she worked with careful precision, her hands steady but her mind occupied with the music in the corner. Each plate she carried, each cup she poured, carried with it a tension she could not release until the moment came. She watched the clock, counted the seconds between serving customers, and felt that familiar pull in her chest, the desire to play, to let the music fill the air, to remind herself that she was more than just a waitress in a small diner. The morning passed in a blur of movement and service. The regulars came and went, exchanging smiles and greetings, oblivious to the brewing tension in the corner of the room. The group of newcomers continued to snicker and whisper, unaware that they had already stirred something powerful inside her. She had always known that talent could be dangerous in the wrong hands, but she also knew that it was part of who she was, and no amount of mockery could erase it. Finally, after what felt like hours, there was a brief pause. The group of loud customers had momentarily quieted, leaving a rare silence that seemed almost sacred. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the day and the pull of the piano. With careful steps, she approached it, her fingers hovering over the keys for just a moment. Then, almost without thinking, she pressed down, letting a soft note ring out. The sound was pure and clear, cutting through the remnants of laughter and chatter. She closed her eyes, letting the music guide her, letting the melody carry her beyond the diner walls, beyond the judgment, beyond the struggles that pressed down on her daily life. The first few notes were tentative, soft like whispers meant only for herself. Then the confidence grew, and her fingers moved with grace and precision, coaxing a beautiful, intricate melody from the worn keys. The air shifted in the diner. The regulars looked up in surprise. The cooks paused mid-motion, and even the group of loud newcomers fell silent, caught off guard by the unexpected music. She didn't play for them. She played for the feeling, for the release, for the joy that surged through her chest as her hands danced across the piano. Each note carried emotion. Each chord spoke of years of hidden talent, of practice in quiet rooms, of moments when she had believed she might never be seen. For a few minutes, the diner transformed. The small corner with the old piano became a stage, and she became more than a waitress. She became a musician, a storyteller, a force of beauty and power that no one had expected. And in that moment, as the music filled the space, she felt something shift inside her. The knot of anxiety, the fear of judgment, the weight of unspoken dreams, it all began to lift. She realized that talent could not stay hidden forever, that the world might laugh, mock, or underestimate her, but she had a voice, and it was hers to share, whether anyone believed in it or not. The morning had started as any other, with the usual routine and quiet struggles, but it had changed forever in the corner of a small diner, at the hands of a young woman who simply could not keep her music inside. After the first few notes echoed through the diner, a strange quiet fell over the room. The regulars looked up from their breakfasts, coffee cups paused in midair, eyes wide with curiosity. Even the cook stopped for a moment, spatula in hand, listening. But the group of newcomers did not remain quiet for long. One of them laughed, a sharp mocking sound cutting through the melody. The others joined in, some pointing, whispering, smirking, clearly finding amusement in the idea that a waitress could play something beyond simple tunes. She felt the laughter sharp and pointed, but she did not stop. Each note, each chord was a small rebellion against their ridicule. She had learned over the years that people often laughed at what they did not understand. The young woman at the piano had faced mockery before, though never quite like this. Never with so much attention focused on her talent. The laughter tried to pierce her confidence, to pull her back into the shadows where she usually stayed. But her fingers moved with purpose, guided by the music inside her. They whispered comments about her appearance, about how small and ordinary she looked, as if talent could not live behind quiet eyes and a modest uniform. The words were harsh, but she had long since built armor around herself, a shield made of patience, resilience, and a love for music that no one could take away. She let the melody speak for her, letting the notes carry her feelings, her frustrations, and her dreams in a way that words could never capture. At first, some of the diners thought it was a trick. Maybe she had taken lessons once, years ago, and now she was just showing off a few practiced pieces. But as the music continued, the complexity of the melody, the emotional depth, and the delicate transitions between soft and powerful passages made it clear that this was not a simple act. She was not playing to impress, yet her skill demanded attention. The laughter began to waver, replaced by a different kind of noise, murmurs of surprise, exclamations of admiration whispered among the tables. The young woman did not look up. She closed her eyes, focusing entirely on the music, feeling it resonate in her chest, in her arms, in her fingers. Each key she pressed seemed to release a story, a memory, a part of herself that had been kept hidden for so long. One of the newcomers, frustrated that their mockery had not broken her, leaned forward, whispering loudly, asking if she could really play something more difficult. They seemed to think they were daring her, challenging her to fail. But she did not falter. In fact, she smiled slightly, just a flicker of a smile, almost hidden, almost private, as she began to shift the melody into something richer, something more intricate. Her fingers danced across the keys, light and sure, producing a melody that was both delicate and powerful, like the wind brushing through leaves before a storm. The diner seemed to change around her. The air felt heavier with emotion, as if the music had weight, as if it was alive. People stopped what they were doing, listening, letting the sound fill the room. The regulars, who had known her quietly and respected her without really understanding her, began to see a side of her they had never imagined. The young woman who served pancakes and coffee with a gentle smile was capable of creating something extraordinary, something that could reach into their hearts without words. The group of loud newcomers now sat in stunned silence, eyes wide, mouths slightly open. They had come in thinking they would find amusement, perhaps even humiliation, but instead they were caught off guard by the talent they had underestimated. One of them, the one who had laughed the loudest, leaned back in their chair, staring at her in disbelief. The smug expressions were gone, replaced with a kind of hesitant respect. They whispered to each other, realizing that the girl at the piano was not what they had expected at all. She did not let their reactions distract her. Every note she played was a message, not just to them, but to herself. The music was a declaration, a statement that she was more than the uniform she wore, more than the job she had to do to survive, more than the mockery of strangers. It was her voice, her freedom, her way of being seen in a world that often ignored her. The melody swelled, filling the diner with a richness that made even the clatter of dishes and the background chatter fade into silence. For a few moments, time seemed to stretch. The ordinary walls of the diner became a stage, the worn wooden floor a concert hall, and the old upright piano a grand instrument that could carry emotion across space. The young woman lost herself in the music, forgetting the tiredness in her legs, the aches in her back, the long list of worries waiting for her outside the diner. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a musician, fully alive in the moment, fully expressing herself in a way she had been denied for too long. The murmurs among the regulars grew louder. Some of them had taken to watching her from their seats, quietly amazed at the depth of her talent. One older man, a retired teacher who came in every morning for coffee and toast, shook his head in wonder, muttering softly about how he had never imagined anyone in that diner could play like that. Another, a young woman who often worked late nights herself, felt a tear prick at her eye, moved by the sheer honesty in the music. Even the cooks, usually too busy to notice much beyond the kitchen, paused their work to listen. The sizzle of frying bacon and the clatter of pans became a backdrop to the music, blending in a way that made the scene feel almost magical. For once, the diner was not just a place to eat. It was a space where emotions could be felt openly, where the human spirit could be seen and heard in a small, ordinary setting. The group of newcomers, still seated near the piano, slowly stopped whispering among themselves. Their earlier amusement had vanished completely, replaced with a quiet awe. They shifted in their seats, uncertain how to react. One of them, unable to hide a smile of genuine surprise, leaned closer, clearly impressed despite themselves. Another whispered to their companion, something about never expecting to see such skill from someone who seemed so ordinary. There was a subtle change in the atmosphere, a turning of tables in more ways than one. She finished the piece with a flourish, a delicate final note that hung in the air like a breath caught in time. The room remained silent for a moment, as if no one quite knew how to respond. Then slowly applause began to ripple through the diner. It started with a few regulars, then grew louder, catching even the group of newcomers by surprise. They clapped, some awkwardly at first, then with genuine appreciation. The young woman at the piano opened her eyes, looking up at the faces around her. For the first time she saw admiration, respect, and even a little awe in the eyes of people who had only moments ago doubted her. Her hands rested lightly on the keys, heart still racing, and she allowed herself a small private smile. The moment was hers, a victory not over anyone else but over the fear and self-doubt that had kept her hidden for so long. She had shared her gift, not to prove anything to the world, but to remind herself that she was capable, talented, and worthy of recognition. In that quiet, transformative moment, she understood the power of music not just to entertain, but to connect, to heal, and to inspire. The newcomer who had been the loudest earlier approached cautiously, offering a hesitant compliment, an acknowledgement of her skill. She nodded politely, her smile warm but reserved, letting the music speak for her once more. The rest of the group followed suit, some whispering their amazement, others silently watching in respect. The diner felt different now, alive with energy, a place where ordinary moments had been transformed into something extraordinary. She returned to her station with a renewed sense of purpose, still hearing the echoes of the applause in her mind. The day continued, but the atmosphere had shifted. People were more attentive, more respectful, more willing to see beyond appearances. She carried plates and refilled cups, but the weight on her shoulders felt lighter. She had faced ridicule and emerged not only unbroken, but celebrated in her own quiet, powerful way. The music had done more than entertain. It had changed perceptions, created connections, and reminded everyone present that talent can be hidden in the most unexpected places, waiting for the right moment to shine. The atmosphere in the diner had shifted. The laughter and mocking that had filled the air earlier had faded into a quiet tension. The regulars watched with a new curiosity, and even the group of newcomers seemed unsure how to behave. The young woman had returned to her station, carrying plates and refilling drinks, but her mind remained on the piano in the corner. Her fingers itched to return to the keys, to let the music flow again, to reclaim the space that had briefly become hers. One of the newcomers, a tall man with a mischievous grin, leaned back in his chair and smirked. "So, can you play something more impressive?" he said, his tone dripping with mockery as if daring her to fail. The others chuckled softly, clearly expecting her to hesitate, to shy away, to reveal that her earlier performance had been a fluke. She looked at him calmly, her eyes steady, and for a moment the diner seemed to hold its breath. She did not answer with words. Instead, she finished her tasks, carefully setting down trays, wiping a few tables, and moving past them with quiet determination. Every step carried a mixture of nerves and resolve. When she reached the piano, she paused, fingers hovering over the keys, feeling the familiar texture beneath her fingertips. The challenge was clear, but it was not about proving anything to anyone. It was about expressing herself, showing the depth of her music and refusing to let ridicule define her. As she began to play, the room changed once more. The melody started softly, almost tentative, like a whisper, but gradually it grew richer, more intricate, more commanding. Her fingers moved with precision and grace, navigating complex passages and weaving layers of emotion into every note. The music was alive, breathing, telling a story without words, capturing both her frustration and her passion, her pain and her joy. The group of newcomers leaned forward, their smirks fading into genuine astonishment. The man who had dared her now watched silently, his earlier arrogance replaced with respect. He had expected a simple display, something easy to dismiss, but what he heard was beyond his comprehension. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a musician, an artist commanding the room with nothing but her talent and determination. Regulars in the diner exchanged glances, quietly amazed. Some whispered to each other, commenting on how unexpected and extraordinary her skill was. A few reached for their phones, hesitant to interrupt the moment, wanting to capture a glimpse of the talent they had overlooked for so long. The older man who came in for coffee every morning shook his head in wonder, muttering softly about how he had underestimated her, how life often held hidden surprises in the most ordinary places. The young woman continued, allowing the music to flow freely, losing herself in the moment. She no longer felt the weight of judgment or ridicule. Each note she played was a declaration, a statement of her identity, her perseverance, and her refusal to be defined by others' expectations. The melody twisted and turned, building to crescendos that filled the diner with emotion, then softening again into gentle passages that touched the hearts of everyone present. As she played, she noticed subtle changes in the room. The group of newcomers who had come in loud and dismissive now sat in quiet attention. Some had their mouths slightly open in disbelief. Others leaned forward as if drawn by an invisible force. Even the regulars, who had always seen her as just the polite waitress, now looked at her with newfound admiration. They were witnessing something rare and powerful, a hidden talent revealed in the most unexpected setting. The tall man who had challenged her now rose slightly, his expression serious. He whispered to the others, clearly impressed, acknowledging that she was more than he had expected. The dynamic had shifted completely. What had begun as mockery and doubt had transformed into awe and respect. The young woman felt a quiet satisfaction, not from their recognition, but from the knowledge that she had faced their challenge without fear, relying on her skill and her heart. Her fingers danced across the keys, each movement deliberate and expressive. She allowed herself to explore the full range of the piano, experimenting with rhythms, harmonies, and melodies that conveyed the depth of her emotion. She played with confidence, precision, and sensitivity, letting the music reflect not only her talent but her experiences, her struggles, and her dreams. The room seemed to bend around her, absorbing the sound, each person caught in the spell of her performance. Some of the newcomers shifted in their seats, clearly moved despite themselves. One young woman reached for her phone, capturing a few seconds of the performance, though she hesitated, unsure if she should interrupt the moment. Another, a young man who had been quietly skeptical, leaned forward, clearly captivated by the complexity and beauty of the music. Even the cooks, usually focused on their tasks, paused to listen, acknowledging silently that they were witnessing something extraordinary. As the piece reached its climax, the young woman felt a rush of emotion. She had never played with such intensity in public before, and yet it felt natural, necessary, as if the music had been waiting for this moment all along. The notes poured out, weaving a story that was both personal and universal, touching the hearts of everyone present. She could feel the energy of the room shifting, the tension transforming into connection, understanding, and appreciation. When the final note lingered in the air, a moment of silence followed. The diner seemed to hold its breath as if waiting for someone to speak, to acknowledge the performance. Then slowly applause began to ripple through the room. It started with a few regulars, then grew, catching even the group of newcomers off guard. Their earlier arrogance had vanished completely, replaced with genuine admiration. The tall man who had challenged her gave a subtle nod, a silent acknowledgement of her talent and courage. The young woman rose from the piano, her hands still tingling from the effort and emotion of playing. She returned to her station, feeling a sense of quiet triumph. The moment had been hers not for the approval of others, but for the expression of her own voice, her own talent. The music had allowed her to claim a space for herself, to demonstrate her capabilities, and to remind everyone present that appearances could be deceiving. As she continued serving the remaining customers, she noticed the change in their demeanor. Conversations were quieter, respectful, and filled with curiosity. The regulars exchanged knowing glances, recognizing that they had just witnessed something special. The group of newcomers, though initially stunned, now observed with interest, clearly re-evaluating their earlier judgments. The diner had transformed from a simple breakfast spot into a space where talent, courage, and passion had intersected, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. For the young woman, the experience was transformative. She had faced doubt, ridicule, and challenge, and had emerged not only unscathed but celebrated in a subtle, powerful way. The piano in the corner was no longer just an old instrument. It had become a symbol of her resilience, skill, and the hidden potential that could shine through when given the chance. She knew that this was only the beginning. that there were more opportunities to explore, more moments to share her gift, and more ways to impact the world around her through her music. The diner slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but the echoes of the performance lingered. People talked quietly about what they had just heard, sharing their amazement and appreciation. The young woman moved with a renewed sense of confidence, understanding that her talent was not something to hide or doubt. She had faced a challenge, risen to the occasion, and revealed a part of herself that had long been waiting for recognition. As the day continued, the young woman caught glimpses of the impact her music had made. Customers who had been skeptical or indifferent now watched her with a new respect. Even the group of newcomers, though initially resistant, showed signs of admiration and curiosity. The diner had become a stage, the piano a conduit for connection, and she had taken her place at the center, demonstrating that talent, courage, and heart could transform even the most ordinary of spaces. By the end of the morning, the young woman felt a quiet satisfaction. She had turned an unexpected challenge into an opportunity, proving to herself that she could rise above doubt and mockery, that her music had the power to captivate and inspire. She knew that more challenges would come, that there would be moments of judgment and skepticism, but she also knew that she had the strength and skill to face them. The piano, once a quiet companion, had become a stage for her voice, her talent, and her spirit, ready to shine whenever the moment called. The young woman returned to her station, her heart still racing from the music she had just played. The room felt different now. The energy of the diner had shifted. People moved a little slower, talked a little quieter, and watched her with a new curiosity. The regulars exchanged whispers of admiration, clearly stunned by the depth of her talent. The group of newcomers who had been loud and mocking just an hour before now seemed hesitant to speak, unsure how to respond to someone who had completely surprised them. She continued her work, carrying plates, refilling drinks, and wiping tables, but the music lingered in the air. Every time she glanced at the piano in the corner, she felt a pull to return, to let the melody continue, to let the story she had started flow further. Her fingers itched, not with nervousness, but with the desire to create, to share, to express. The piano was no longer just an object in the diner. It had become a bridge between her inner world and the people around her. As she worked, she noticed the subtle changes in the customers. The regulars looked at her differently, their previous casual familiarity replaced with respect. Some smiled knowingly, as if sharing a secret about the talent she had revealed. Others whispered quietly to each other, marveling at the music they had just witnessed. Even the newcomers, once dismissive and loud, now observed her with a kind of awe, their earlier arrogance replaced with curiosity and interest. The tall man who had challenged her earlier leaned back in his chair, watching her carefully. He spoke softly to his companions, acknowledging her skill without drawing too much attention. The young woman, aware of his gaze but focused on her tasks, felt a quiet satisfaction. She did not need their validation, but the recognition of her talent, even from those who had doubted her, brought a sense of accomplishment. She had faced challenge, ridicule, and skepticism, and had emerged unshaken, her music speaking louder than any words could. A few moments later, a child at one of the tables approached the piano cautiously, eyes wide with curiosity. The young woman smiled gently at the child, motioning for them to stay back as she began to play again. This time her fingers moved more freely, exploring melodies that were lighter, playful, and full of joy. The child's eyes lit up, and soon a few other customers gathered around, drawn in by the enchanting sound. The diner had become a small concert hall, each person captivated by the music, each note telling a story that words could not convey. The newcomers, initially unsure how to react, now leaned forward, some whispering to each other in admiration. The tall man, who had been the most skeptical, nodded subtly, acknowledging the depth of her talent. The music was no longer a challenge or a performance to prove anything. It had become a shared experience, connecting everyone in the room through emotion and sound. The young woman played with a confidence that radiated from her, each chord deliberate, each melody expressive, weaving a tapestry of feeling that resonated with every listener. She let the music guide her, improvising as she went, exploring harmonies and rhythms that felt natural and true. The diner seemed to fade away, leaving only the piano, the sound, and the people who had been touched by it. She could see the effect on the faces around her, expressions of surprise, delight, and admiration. Some customers whispered softly to each other, pointing out the intricacies of the music, while others simply sat, mesmerized, letting the sound wash over them. As she played, she felt a connection with each person in the diner. The regulars who had known her for years now saw a side of her they had never imagined. The newcomers who had mocked and doubted her were now captivated, their earlier behavior replaced with humility and respect. Even the cooks, busy in the kitchen, paused to listen, their work momentarily forgotten as they took in the music. The piano had transformed the diner into a place of shared experience, a space where emotions could be felt openly, and where the young woman's talent could shine fully. The melody shifted, becoming more powerful, more intense, reflecting the journey she had taken to reach this point. Each note carried emotion, telling a story of struggle, resilience, and determination. The young woman's fingers moved with precision and grace, coaxing the piano to sing with a voice that was uniquely hers. The room seemed to vibrate with the sound, each person in the diner caught in the spell of her performance, unable to look away or interrupt the flow of music. She noticed subtle changes in the newcomers' behavior. They no longer whispered or smirked. Instead, they leaned in, listening intently, clearly moved by the music. The tall man who had been the loudest skeptic earlier now had a thoughtful expression, his eyes fixed on her hands as they danced across the keys. It was clear that their perception of her had shifted completely. The young woman had taken their mockery and transformed it into a moment of admiration and respect. The regulars began to clap softly, some standing to show their appreciation. Their applause was sincere, a recognition of the talent that had been hidden in plain sight for so long. The young woman smiled subtly, allowing herself a moment of pride, but she remained focused on the music. This was not about seeking approval. It was about expressing herself fully and authentically, and sharing the beauty she carried within her. As the music continued, the diner became a place of magic and wonder. The sound filled every corner, weaving through conversations, blending with the clatter of dishes and the hum of voices. It was as if the piano had created a temporary world where only the music mattered, where judgments and assumptions were irrelevant, and where everyone could be moved by something genuine and beautiful. The young woman felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had not only shared her talent, but had also touched the hearts of those around her. The piece reached its climax, powerful and evocative, drawing the attention of every person in the diner. Even the most skeptical newcomers could not hide their admiration. Their expressions softened and their posture changed, reflecting respect and awe. The regulars clapped louder, some with tears in their eyes, moved by the raw emotion and skill displayed before them. The young woman played with passion, every note deliberate, every chord resonating with meaning, capturing the attention and hearts of everyone present. When the final note lingered in the air, a hush fell over the diner. For a moment no one spoke, as if the music had suspended time itself. Then slowly applause erupted, filling the space with appreciation and acknowledgement. The young woman rose from the piano, her hands tingling from the effort and emotion, and returned to her station. She felt a sense of quiet triumph, a deep satisfaction that came from sharing her gift authentically and connecting with those around her. The tall man approached cautiously, offering a genuine compliment, acknowledging her skill and courage. The others followed suit, whispering their admiration, clearly moved by the performance. The diner, once an ordinary place of meals and conversation, had become a space of connection, inspiration, and shared experience. The young woman's talent had transformed the atmosphere, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. As she continued her work, she felt a renewed sense of confidence and purpose. The music had not only allowed her to express herself, but it also created a moment of transformation for those around her. People who had doubted her, mocked her, or overlooked her now saw her in a new light. The piano, once a quiet presence in the corner, had become a symbol of her strength, skill, and the power of hidden talent revealed. The day continued, but the effects of the performance lingered. Customers moved with more attentiveness. Conversations carried a tone of admiration and curiosity, and the young woman moved through the diner with a sense of accomplishment and pride. She knew that she had taken a step forward, that her music had created connections and changed perceptions, and that this moment would remain with her and those who had witnessed it for a long time. By the end of the day, the young woman felt a quiet contentment, She had faced challenge and skepticism, transformed doubt into admiration, and shared a part of herself that had long been hidden. The piano in the corner was no longer just an instrument. It was a gateway to expression, connection, and recognition. She knew that more challenges and opportunities would come, but she also knew that her talent and courage could guide her through them. The diner, the piano, and the people she had touched that day would remain a memory of a turning point. A moment when her music changed not only her own life, but the atmosphere and hearts of everyone around her. The following days at the diner felt different. People talked about what had happened, sharing stories of the young woman at the piano who had transformed a simple morning into something extraordinary. Her regular customers gave her knowing smiles and gentle nods of encouragement, some even bringing extra tips or small treats as a way of showing appreciation. The group of newcomers who had once mocked her now returned quietly, not with arrogance but with genuine curiosity, sometimes even asking her about the music or complimenting her talent. The diner, once a simple place to eat, had become a space of admiration and warmth, a place where people recognized the beauty that had always been there but unnoticed. The young woman continued her work with renewed confidence, yet her heart still held a quiet nervousness. The memory of her music reaching the hearts of so many lingered, and she felt both excitement and uncertainty about what might come next. She kept her piano sessions brief at first, allowing herself small moments to play during quieter hours. Her fingers moved over the keys with practiced ease, but now the music carried something more than just emotion. It carried the understanding that her talent could touch people, could inspire, and could even change how others saw her. Word began to spread beyond the diner. A few customers who had recorded short videos of her performance shared them on social media, and slowly, her talent started to reach more people. The posts gathered attention, comments of admiration, and messages from people who were amazed that such skill could come from someone working quietly in a small diner. She heard about it through whispers from customers and the occasional mention by co-workers, and a mixture of surprise and humility filled her heart. She never expected such recognition, but she realized that sharing her gift had opened doors she had not imagined. One afternoon, a local reporter visited the diner, asking if she could share her story and perform for a short video segment. The young woman agreed quietly, nervous but willing to seize the opportunity. The small diner became the stage once again, and as she played, she felt the familiar joy and flow of music. Cameras captured her fingers dancing across the keys, the expressions of customers and staff, and the way the room transformed when the music filled it. The reporter asked a few gentle questions, curious about her journey, her training, and how she had discovered her love for the piano. She spoke simply, honestly, sharing her story without exaggeration, letting her words reflect the same sincerity as her music. The video went online and the response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from people inspired by her talent, stories of those who had been moved by her music, and invitations from local venues and community events asking if she would perform. The young woman felt a mix of disbelief and gratitude. She had always played for herself, for the release, for the joy of creating sound, and now her music had touched countless others. It was a new chapter, one filled with possibility and hope, and she was ready to step into it. Despite the attention, she remained humble. She continued to work at the diner, balancing her job with the new opportunities that had arisen. Each day she served customers with the same care and attention, but now with a subtle pride, knowing that those who saw her had glimpsed something extraordinary. She played at the piano during quiet moments, sometimes improvising, sometimes revisiting familiar pieces, and each time she felt the same deep satisfaction, the same connection to the music and to the people around her. As the weeks passed, she received invitations to perform at local events, small concerts, and community gatherings. Each performance was a new adventure, a chance to share her gift with a broader audience, and she embraced them with a mixture of excitement and humility. She remembered the diner, the place where it all had begun, and she never forgot the feeling of her music transforming the ordinary into something magical. Each new opportunity carried the same essence: connection, expression, and the power of talent to inspire. One evening, as she returned to the diner after a small local concert, she paused to look at the piano in the corner. It was familiar, worn, and comforting. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, recalling the first time she had played there, the nervous excitement and the doubt she had faced. Now she felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She had grown not just as a musician but as a person who had learned to embrace her talent and share it with the world. The piano was no longer just an object. It was a companion, a symbol of her journey, and a reminder of the moments that had changed her life. Customers entered the diner, some recognizing her from videos or local performances, others simply curious. They greeted her warmly, sometimes asking to hear a few notes on the piano. She smiled, always willing to share a moment of music, never taking for granted the connection it brought. The diner buzzed with a new energy, a sense of possibility and wonder that had not been there before. Her talent had created more than admiration. It had created a community, a space where people came together even briefly to experience something beautiful. She also took time to mentor a few young students from the neighborhood who had shown interest in music. They came to the diner during quiet hours, and she guided them patiently, sharing what she had learned through years of practice and dedication. Teaching brought her another kind of joy, a fulfillment beyond performing. She saw the spark of potential in their eyes, and she knew that talent, when nurtured and shared, could ripple out in ways she had never imagined. The diner had become not only her stage but a place of learning and inspiration for others. Through all this, she remained grounded. She remembered the laughter, the doubt, and the challenge she had faced at the hands of those newcomers. She realized that those moments had been necessary, pushing her to embrace her talent fully and share it with courage. The ridicule had transformed into recognition, doubt into respect, and hesitation into confidence. She understood now that every moment of struggle had been a step toward this new chapter of her life, where music and human connection intertwined in ways she had always dreamed of. The young woman continued to play, perform, and teach, each day bringing new opportunities and new connections. Her story, once confined to the walls of a small diner, now inspired people far beyond its doors. She had discovered that talent, when shared with courage and authenticity, could change lives, touch hearts, and create possibilities beyond imagination. The diner remained her home, her stage, and her safe space. But the world had opened up to her in ways she had never expected. Looking back, she felt gratitude for every challenge, every moment of doubt, and every small opportunity that had led her to this point. Music had been her companion through hardship, her voice when words were insufficient, and her bridge to the world. She knew that this was just the beginning, that more experiences and more journeys awaited, but she also knew that she had the strength, skill, and heart to face them. The piano, once quiet in the corner, had become a symbol of hope, talent, and the power of courage. Through it, she had transformed not only her life but also the hearts of those around her, leaving a legacy that would resonate far beyond the small diner where it all began. Though the young woman had already experienced a remarkable change in her life, Part 6 of her story marked the beginning of something even larger. The attention she received had expanded far beyond the diner, reaching local communities, music enthusiasts, and even small venues that invited her to perform. She felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness as she prepared for each new opportunity, knowing that her talent could touch even more people if she dared to step beyond the familiar walls of the diner. One morning, a message arrived from a nearby community center, asking if she would play at their upcoming event. She hesitated for a moment, glancing at the old piano in the diner that had become her trusted companion. The thought of performing for a larger audience filled her with both anticipation and apprehension. But she knew she could not let fear hold her back. She had already faced ridicule and turned it into admiration. Now it was time to take another step forward. She agreed, promising to bring her music and her heart to the stage. Preparation for the performance became her focus. She spent quiet hours at the diner, practicing intricate pieces, improvising, and exploring new melodies. Each note she played carried the weight of her journey, from shy beginnings to the confident, expressive musician she had become. She experimented with dynamics, tempo, and emotion, finding ways to make the music resonate not just in her own heart, but in the hearts of others. The piano became an extension of herself, a medium through which she could communicate without words, expressing stories, dreams, and feelings that had long been silent. The day of the community event arrived, and she carried a mixture of nerves and excitement. The small auditorium was filled with people eager to hear her play, some who had seen her videos online, others who had heard of the young woman who had amazed diners with her talent. She took a deep breath as she stepped onto the stage, her hands brushing the piano keys for reassurance. The room fell quiet, anticipation hanging in the air like a gentle fog. She began to play, slowly at first, allowing the sound to fill the space gradually. The notes were delicate, weaving a story that captured the attention of everyone present. As she continued, her confidence grew and the music became more expressive, more powerful. Her fingers danced across the keys with skill and grace, producing melodies that carried joy, sorrow, hope, and determination. Each chord was intentional, each phrase a reflection of her journey, every note a connection to the audience. The audience was captivated. People leaned forward in their seats, listening intently, eyes fixed on her hands and the music that flowed from them. Some closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them, while others exchanged looks of admiration and surprise. She was no longer just a young woman from a small diner. She was a musician capable of moving hearts and minds with her talent. The energy in the room was palpable, a shared experience that transcended words. As she played, she thought of the diner, of the old upright piano in the corner that had been her first stage. She remembered the laughter and mockery, the doubt and the challenge, and how it had all led her to this moment. Each note she played was a tribute to that journey, a way of honoring the path that had brought her here. The music flowed effortlessly, a mixture of practiced skill and raw emotion, carrying her story to everyone who listened. Midway through the performance, she paused for a moment, allowing the audience to absorb the emotion she had conveyed. She looked up and saw faces filled with awe, smiles of appreciation, and a few tears glistening in the eyes of those deeply moved. The impact of her music was undeniable. It reached beyond entertainment, touching hearts in a way that felt intimate and profound. She continued playing, weaving in new melodies, exploring contrasts of light and dark, loud and soft, playful and somber. Each shift in the music reflected the layers of her own experience, her struggles and triumphs, her quiet strength, and her unspoken dreams. After the final note resonated through the auditorium, there was a moment of silence, a pause as the audience absorbed what they had just experienced. Then applause erupted, loud and heartfelt, filling the room with recognition and admiration. People stood, clapping and cheering, some even whistling in excitement. The young woman felt a rush of emotion, a mixture of relief, pride, and gratitude. She had faced the stage, the expectation and the unknown, and she had connected with the audience in a way that was genuine and powerful. After the performance, she received words of encouragement and praise from members of the community, some expressing how deeply they had been touched by her music. A few offered opportunities for further performances, collaborations, and even lessons, recognizing not only her talent, but her ability to convey emotion and story through her piano. She felt humbled by their recognition, aware that her journey had only just begun, and that each step forward opened doors she had never imagined. Back at the diner, life resumed its familiar rhythm, but nothing felt quite the same. The young woman carried a sense of accomplishment and possibility in her heart. She continued serving customers with care, but now she also shared small moments of music whenever she could. Patrons who had heard of her performances visited, eager to experience her talent in its original setting. The diner had become a place of inspiration, a space where stories, music, and human connection intertwined, all because of one young woman's courage to play her music openly. Her teaching efforts grew as well. More young students began to come to the diner, some with no prior experience, others with some musical background. She guided them patiently, sharing techniques, encouraging expression, and fostering confidence. Watching their growth brought her immense joy, reinforcing the understanding that her music could create impact beyond herself. She had transformed not only her life, but also the lives of those around her, creating ripples that extended far beyond the small piano in the corner. The young woman continued to explore new opportunities, performing at events, small concerts, and community gatherings. She learned to balance her work at the diner with her growing presence as a musician, finding fulfillment in both. The music, once a secret companion, had become a bridge between her and the world, a tool to inspire, connect, and express herself authentically. Each performance, each lesson, each moment of sharing reinforced the power of talent nurtured with dedication, courage, and heart. One evening, after a long day of work and a local performance, she returned to the diner and sat at the old piano, letting her fingers explore melodies freely. The room was quiet, the evening calm, and she allowed herself to reflect on how far she had come. She thought of the mornings filled with ridicule, the laughter and doubt that had once seemed insurmountable. She realized that those challenges had shaped her, had pushed her to embrace her talent fully, and had led to moments of recognition, connection, and fulfillment she had never imagined. The young woman understood that her journey was ongoing, that music would continue to guide her through new experiences, challenges, and opportunities. She had learned to embrace the unexpected, to transform doubt into admiration, and to let her talent shine authentically. The piano remained a constant companion, a source of comfort, creativity, and expression, allowing her to communicate in ways words could never capture. Her music had the power to move, inspire, and connect, and she was determined to continue sharing it with the world. As she played that evening, she felt a sense of peace and purpose. The journey that began with quiet moments at a small diner had expanded into a life filled with music, connection, and growth. She knew there would be more challenges, more skeptics, and more moments of uncertainty, but she also knew that she had the strength, skill, and heart to face them. The piano in the corner was more than an instrument. It was a symbol of resilience, talent, and the transformative power of courage. Through it, she had discovered her voice, touched the hearts of many, and created a legacy that would resonate far beyond the walls of the small diner where it all began.